I recall sitting down on the bench to relax, and I must have fallen asleep because when I awoke several hours later, the streets were deserted. I believed I was the only person there. When I saw the old bus coming down the street in my direction, black smoke emitting from its exhaust pipe and breaking the silence, my heart nearly leaped out of my chest. The streetlights provided some illumination for the bus, but I was quite alarmed by how they flickered as it passed. The vehicle appeared to be a 1960s throwback, the kind of antique tin can on wheels you'd expect to see at a classic automobile show. This old rust bucket rattled along, noisily appearing as though it could break down at any moment, unlike the modern vehicles we're used to, those that glide along the street softly, but instead it kept coming, driving down the empty road and approaching ever closer to my refuge. I observed that the bus's sides were plain and unpainted, and that its front windscreen displayed no destination name. Because the exterior of the car was completely black and the windows were tinted, I was unable to see anyone or anything inside. The information I'd heard about the last bus legend, one of those I'd read and researched in my youth, sent a shiver down my spine. The car in front of me was exactly like the coach from the Tales, the phantom bus that arrives in the early morning hours on a deserted road and offers rides to the tired and hungry. In that instant, I was on the verge of panic, unsure if I was awake or experiencing a paranoid delusion. I had focused a big part of my youth to investigating these myths and looking for any evidence that would support the existence of a reality different from our own. But now that I can see the truth clearly, a major part of me wants to leave my position and escape. I didn't, though. I'm not sure if I was dazed by fear or if my curiosity overcame me, but I stood my position and waited for the bus to approach me. Despite the amount of booze I consumed, I suddenly felt pretty sober as I rose up on my trembling feet as the coach pulled up next to my shelter. The car took a while to pull up, and it took even longer for the creaky door to swing open. When it did, I was met by a pleasant middle-aged man driving his bus to an unidentified location while sitting behind the wheel and donning a nice blue uniform. He looked down at me with a friendly smile on his face and welcoming eyes. Then he opened his mouth and said, "Good evening, my friend," in a calm, almost fatherly voice. "Are you coming on board?" Although I had heard of the mysterious driver before, I was nevertheless surprised by his appearance and whole behavior. I hesitated through my response as I was unable to find the right words to use. "Where will you take me?" I jumped to a question. "Home." The driver gave a comforting smile in response. "I'll eventually take you home. But the journey, not the destination, is what makes life worth living. You sometimes have to make a leap of faith. So, my young friend, what are your thoughts? Can you come along?" I'll admit that at that specific moment, I was terrified. I suddenly understood how serious this was and how my choice at that moment would affect the rest of my life. I wasn't quite sure what awaited me if I boarded, but I had a pretty good concept, and it was scary. However, if I left, I would never learn the truth. I then took a big breath, managed to gather the bravery to get on board the bus, and stared as the driver smiled as the door gently shut behind me. I immediately began to regret my choice when I got a good look at the bus driver and noticed he had a terrible vibe about him, but it was already too late. That was my first time taking the night bus. I've been on it 3 times now, and each time I've survived. It's not as simple as you might think to catch the phantom bus. There are no rules to follow, nor is there a specific time or location. I'm not sure if it's pure luck or if the bus selects its passengers. I have, however, been able to piece together common threads, drawing on both my own and the experiences of others who have traveled the same path. We used to share information and communicate our tales. Safety is as much of a concern as anything else. If you don't keep your wits about you, the night bus can be terrible. I will now impart this knowledge to you after gathering it over the past few years. As soon as you go inside the bus, you'll notice rows of hardback seats extending all the way to the back of the vehicle. At first sight, nothing about this seems out of the ordinary. Other passengers will be present as well, but at this time you shouldn't interact with them and avoid eye contact. Take a seat near the front of the bus on an empty bench. It doesn't really matter where. They will come to you at their own pace. Even though it won't actually feel that way while you're on board, the trip itself can take several hours. From the inside, you can gaze out the windows at the scenery, such as it is. You'll notice familiar sights at first, such as city center streets, buildings, and businesses. Nonetheless, you'll quickly notice that something isn't quite right about the scene. The streets will be completely deserted, with no signs of traffic or pedestrians. There will be no businesses open or lights visible anywhere along the road. However, the further you drive away from the city center, the stranger the sights become. Soon, the clean streets and well-kept buildings will give way to urban decay, crumbling structures and ruins reminds of a long-forgotten city. After leaving the city, the bus will enter what appears to be a dense forest. The narrow road ahead will be completely dark, with only the vehicle's bright headlights providing illumination. If you look into the woods on either side of the road, you'll see shadows moving behind the treeline, strange figures and unidentified animals with glowing red eyes staring through the darkness. You'll only see these terrifying creatures for a few seconds as the bus passes by, and then they'll be gone. At first, you'll think it's just your vivid imagination playing a joke on you, but you'll feel inside that something evil is hiding in those woods. It should be definite through this spot in the trip that you're no longer inside the sphere of the living. I'm not confident where the bus takes you, but it's not a fine decision to gaze out the windows for quite a while now. What hides outside can drive you insane. Furthermore, your attention should be focused on the people in the bus, as they pose the more obvious danger. My friend online investigators, as well as I refer to the writers as lost souls. It appears that they're no longer an element of the living world. There is a component lacking in them, an important piece. You can see the unhappiness in their blank, hollow eyes once you communicate with them, and they will interact with you whether you wish them to or not. They want a grip to you because you possess what they really want, existence. That is why it is essential that you adhere to the guidelines. Whatever you choose, do not even allow them to get within your head. Once you board the bus, you'll probably meet 6 distinct entities, one of every having their own set of characteristics and tricks that they'll try to utilize against you. I've managed to cobble together a summary of each of the strange employed to determine on our friend's common memories. First, there seems to be the car owner, whom the physical features I've mentioned by now. The driver's first obligation is to bring you on platform. This is the reason he will seem so pleasant and inviting, appealing you to travel on his bus. When the door closes behind your back and the bus begins to move, you'll realize the driver's smiling face disappear mildly as he breaks gaze and concentrates on the route. Despite this, the car owner is a delightful personality who gets to play a mild and yet major role in the occurrences that undergo. From now on, his primary duty is to continue driving. And he keeps his word to you. He'll get you home at some point, supposing you do not even run into one of the souls on the way. As I stated previously, the trip will have seemed to last hours, but then when he drops you off on your home street, back throughout our sphere, no moment will have passed. He waves you off, laughing and nodding, "Have a pleasant night. I hope to see you again soon." And you'll be left standing on the road outside your house, puzzled and in stunned disbelief as you witness the phantom bus drive down the street prior to actually disappearing forever at the end of your road. The first passenger you're likely to encounter after the driver is the party girl. This is a lovely young lady in her early to mid-20s. Her physical appearance will vary depending on the situation. Her hair will be blonde at times and brunette at others. Similarly, relying on the viewer, her skin tone can be pale or dark. What remains constant is her makeup and dress style, which consists of a floral dress, high heels, and a handbag. You can tell she's remained crying because her mascara has run. During the early stages of the journey, the party girl will engage you in some heartbreaking stories about her life, distracting you from the unusual attractions outside the bus's windows. You'll feel sorry, but you need to relocate on and switch seats, leaving the poor girl to her fate. The very next traveler you'll see is sitting a few rows behind the party girl. We relate her as the OAP or the senior citizen. She's an old granny, likely in her 80s. Her white curly hair, a shawl and a massive wool coat on, as well as a shopping basket on tires parked underneath the ride. Her skin is wrinkled, and her fragrance is intense, but the old lady has warm-hearted gaze and a delightful caring grin. She will reassure you of an older relative, such as a grandma or great-aunt, and you will feel affection for her. A woman her age and appearance might be the last person you'd anticipate to see on a night bus in the early hours of the morning, but here she is, another lost soul stuck on a trip which never comes to an end. The OAP will talk to you in a pleasant, loving way, questioning regarding your family and your life also while captivating you with tales from her long and fascinating life. You would then genuinely feel comfortable chatting with her, but don't lose track of who she really is. The woman will ask you to accompany her home and help her with her shopping, or something along these boundaries. She'll offer to make you your preferred meal or snack, whatever that might be, and she'll offer to put you to sleep for the night. You'll be persuaded once more, but you have to resist. It makes no difference how graciously you decline her invitation on this time. Anything you say or do, she will explode in anger, yelling every profanity underneath the sun while her face squirms with anger. It's probably the last thing you'd imagine from an apparently lovely elderly woman, yet it'll happen. You must leave your position and go farther down the bus as soon as she began her vicious speech, and you ought to avoid getting involved with her for the remaining of your trip. The following rider is a grungy middle-aged person known as the bore. He sits at the end of the bus and resembles the sort you might imagine to encounter on a late-night trip. I would still not suggest sitting very next to the drunk, merely because his breath stinks of smoke and booze. His old apparel will indeed be filthy and ripped, and his shaggy beard will be severely tangled. You undoubtedly do not want to communicate with him, but he'll begin a discussion with you anyhow, resulting in you being lured in instead of your better instincts. The drunk will expose himself to be a shockingly educated and observant person, trying to teach you on topics such as theology, morality, and theory of evolution. He'll narrate you a tale in the manner of a proverb or tale, with a grim ending. When I initially encountered the drunkard, he told me the story of the frog and the scorpion, which shows how brutal and devastating reality can be. He'll then pull a silver thermos from his inner coat pocket and offer you a sip. You'll be persuaded to take a drink despite of your drinking tastes. The drink will scent wonderful and attractive, but you have to decline him. Once you decline the alcohol, the drunk will give you an irritated glance before lowering his head and muttering, "You're a damn idiot. A foolish small child. You've got no notion what you're up against." This is your signal to proceed. You'll discover that the first three riders are aiming to attract you with whatever attractions or special powers they possess. Their true objective is to fool you into stepping off the bus. It is obvious that if you desire to return home, you must refrain from doing this. No one really understands what happens to individuals who are captured in one of their tricks. We do understand that numerous participants of our community have disappeared throughout the years, and my hometown has a lengthy history of strange happenings. The fourth traveler, on the other hand, is unusual. He is a teenage boy who is seated in the back row, wearing headsets attached to a throwback iPod. We nickname him Headset Boy because it appears that everything he does is hear music while stamping his feet to the rhythm. The teenage boy with the headsets will not interact with you or even notice your appearance. This does not imply he is really not harmful. A member of our team had a confrontation with the boy. To be honest, it was not even clearly intentional. In an attempt to captivate the soul's interest, my friend got up immediately in the traveler's face, raising his arms and tapping his fingers. When it didn't really work, he recklessly snatched the boy's headsets and forcibly dragged them off his head. The headsets boy, unsurprisingly, reacted negatively to this assault. He leapt from his seat in a moment, striking out with his fist and throwing his opponent to the ground with one blow. My colleague recalls experiencing a strong, severe ache in the back of his skull before passing out. The very next incident he recalls is awakening up the following morning in his personal bed, with such a fractured nose and a terrible wound on the back of his skull. He also discovered a message in his denim pocket, badly handwritten on the back of an old bus ticket in what appeared to be dried blood. And it said, "Do it once more and I'll take your damn head off." My colleague, unexpectedly, never traveled the night bus anymore. I'm not sure whatever the headsets boy's issue is, but my suggestion is to dismiss him. So, you're obviously wondering why anybody would want to take the night bus in the first place, considering that you'll be taken to a terrible other reality and face paranormal demons that want to trap you there. The simple answer is that no rational person would, save for a few mad urban explorers and hobbyist paranormal investigators like me. The majority of individuals who've already joined the mysterious bus did so by mistake, unaware of exactly what they were entering themselves into until it was already late. And the majority of individuals who have taken the bus once have no desire to do it again. Individuals like me who return to the phantom bus for a second, third, or fourth time. We own our motives, of course. In fact, there really is one motive above all others. We want to meet the Harbinger and ask him our one approved question. When you initially board the bus, the Harbinger will be the only traveler who is not yet on board. He appears after you've maneuvered your way past the haunting beings and believe that everything is over. The blazing wooden cross on a gloomy hilltop overlooking the road on the left is the first thing you'll observe. I recall the very first time I saw that frightening sign and how frightened I felt because I knew anything horrible was about to happen. I was surprised to see the bus decelerating, turning over to the other side of the road, and stopping in a car park as soon as I noticed the sign. The driver then opened the swinging door in front of the bus, allowing access to whatever was on the opposite side. The evils that waited beneath the other world, the beasts and devils hidden in the haunting forests and slopes, nearly overcame me. I remember glancing about at the remaining travelers, expecting that these sly souls will shield me against whatever was coming, but rather their heads were bowed and they all kept a serious quiet. When I realized I was alone, I looked out the window and saw something that scared me to my core. A modest, enclosed shelter beside the highway was virtually hidden by thick plants and just discernible in the weak light. Inside this seemingly abandoned bus station stood a towering, masked man, a scary guy with his face obscured by a long, black cloak. The mysterious guy stayed motionless and quiet, but I quickly noticed the creature at his side, a gigantic black dog that growled fiercely through a nose loaded with extremely sharp fangs, glaring at me with greedy and dangerous eyes, only a thin glass window dividing us. I anticipated the dog bursting free, storming up the stairs and down the hallway before sinking its razor-sharp fangs into my tender skin. Fortunately, the dog's owner kept control of his animal, while I was still in risk. I also noted how warm and suffocating it got all of a sudden, as an almost terrible wave of hot air hit me. Meantime, the bus sat for what appeared to be a lifetime, its door ajar whereas the operator waited for his passengers to board. But once in a while, he'll move ahead, walking through the mud in his leather boots while pulling his demonic creature on a chain, and board the bus, leading the driver to exclaim, "Good evening, sir. I hope you enjoy your travel." The Harbinger doesn't respond, instead flowing down the aisle, his trusty dog walking behind him. He'll take a seat at the front of the bus, revealing what was behind his hood. I still didn't understand what I saw in that horrible moment. There appeared to be entirely a dark emptiness where his face ought to have been, with two flaming spheres in place of eyes. He didn't have a mouth that I could see, so he should not have been capable of speaking. Yet still he did, screaming out to me in a thunderous, godlike voice that resonated throughout the bus's empty cabin. "Return to me, poor kid. Come sit with me so we can communicate," he said. As you might guess, I was scared in this case, to the point of passing out. Yet, for circumstances I don't understand, I accepted the Harbinger's directions, thinking as if I couldn't actually oppose him and as if my legs weren't any more under my command. I recall glancing down the corridor toward the other travelers, expecting that any of them could assist me. But the four of them mumbled in harmony, repeating a prayer in a language I didn't quite understand. It was clear that the Harbinger possessed power over all these poor souls, and all of them were under his control. Apparently they, too, were victims of the mysterious bus and the Harbinger's godlike capabilities. In any case, they provided no aid in that critical time, and I quickly realized I was fully at the mercy of the Harbinger. I unintentionally chose a seat straight behind the Harbinger. As his dog growled violently in my way, his head rotated in an odd position to confront me, but he avoided the impulse to attack me in the thigh. I can't exactly explain how the Harbinger smelled, except to say he smelled like death. I really cannot take my gaze away from the blazing spheres he possessed rather than eyes, no, despite my best efforts. I seemed like my body was fire, my soul on fire in the face of his venomous gaze. In my terrified condition, I pictured what this creature would do to me. He might easily murder me, but that was the least of my concerns. Rather than, I saw myself as another faceless lost soul, traveling this terrible bus for all duration. In any case, I found it impossible to do anything else other than remain glued to my position, expecting for the Harbinger to speak. Regardless of his lack of eyes, I could tell he was staring down on me, as if he despised me, as if I were anything he'd walked on. I'm still not sure if he was shouting out loud or if his deep voice was only present in my thoughts. In any case, I was completely riveted as he said his words. I see another simple creature has entered my domain. He started. I figured he was talking about me. I'll admit that I have limited time for your despicable and fragile race. However, I must admire the boldness of an outlier like yourself. Fewer people have the bravery to enter this gloomy area. As a result, I will give you safe travel and respond one query. Ask me anything, simple creature, and I will give my immense wisdom to you. This is a scene I've revisited in my thoughts many times throughout the years. I might have asked the Harbinger any question, the jackpot-winning digits, who murdered President, the purpose of existence. He can see and understand anything, and the opportunities are endless. One amongst our participants questioned the Harbinger how he died, and he was informed that his addictions will kill him in 6 months. This person had been addicted, yet he ignored the Harbinger's caution and proceeded to use. He overdosed and died 6 months later. There was also the case of a young lady who was in a violent and domineering relationship at the moment of her contact with the Harbinger. She questioned of the creature what might happen if she remained with her jerk boyfriend. She was informed that unless she terminated the connection, her life would be over. This was sufficient to convince her to leave him, and about a year later, the bastard was caught for killing another girl and condemned to life in jail. But, obviously, I was unaware of anything about this at the time. As the Harbinger gazed down at me with hatred, I sat glued to my seat, shivering in my boots. In that terrifying moment, I could only think of one question to ask, which I blurted out from my shaking lips. What are you? I swear I heard the beast chuckle with hatred before he answered. My dear kid, he wailed, you creatures will never truly know who I am and what I stand for. However, I offer you an explanation, which I will provide in the most basic terms. I am also the past, present, and future all rolled into one. I can see everything from where I am, but I have promised not to interfere in the mortal world. He hesitated for a time, his flaming eyes fixed on the darkening countryside beyond the window. This is my dominion, this planet you see in front of me. This is my territory. I provide refuge to individuals who don't have anywhere else to go, as well as a shelter for poor souls stuck between the mortal and immortal worlds. Maybe one day you'll return here and become a regular inhabitant of my dark land. Or maybe not. After all, you might have inquired about your eventual fate, but you chose not to. However, I have responded your one permissible query and have completed my commitment. And now, my kid, I shall say goodbye. He stood from his seat and collected his dog, sliding down the hallway toward the exit. I was astonished and in a state of disbelief. I still had a number of questions, so I opened my lips without hesitating. Wait, I shouted behind him, immediately hating my choice to say. The Harbinger quickly faced, his orb-like eyes glowing increasingly intense, his dog howling as it made evident its sharp claws, straining on its chain as it attempted to attack me. When the Harbinger broke the silence, his tone turned dangerous and violent. Listen to my caution, you dumb fool. I've accepted your existence in my domain so far in this, but don't put me to the trial. I have the power to exact suffering on you that exceeds your darkest dreams, and I will not refuse to do so if you violate my laws anymore. As pure panic overtook me, I felt all the blood pouring from my face and my entire body trembled violently. Simply put, I didn't say anything else. Nevertheless, I stood there in stunned astonishment as the Harbinger floated across the aisle, carrying his growling hell dog after him. The operator stopped his vehicle to permit the divine entity to depart. I started to feel a sensation of relief as I realized my suffering was almost over, but his horrific drama had one more turn. My fellow commuters immediately jumped up from their chairs as the Harbinger walked off the carriage, all immediately gazing in my way. To my surprise, I noticed that their eyes had gone pitch black and that their mouths had expanded wide, showing enormous black holes. They appeared to be attempting to scream, but no sound was heard. Then I noticed what was hiding inside the black forests along both sides of the highway. Dozens of flaming red eyes peering through the timberline belonged to demonic animals that screamed like werewolves in the night, each one fixed on our bus. I shouted in dread, terrified that the Harbinger had shifted his mind and was calling his horrible henchmen to rip me apart. The wailing quickly grew in pitch, reaching deafeningly loud. What occurred afterwards is somewhat hazy in my mind. I remember the terrifying noise and the stress within my brain building up to the point that I believed my skull would burst. There was a dazzling burst of brightness, prompting me to cover my eyes with my hands. I reopened my eyes again a minute later to see that the creatures, as well as my ghostly travel companions, had disappeared. As we went down that empty portion of road, I was alone inside the bus, just the driver and myself. I don't remember much of the remainder of the travel. I don't suppose we stayed in the dark world for long before returning to the urban roads I knew and recognized. I couldn't realize it when we got on my street, believing it was another prank. I stayed quietly in my position for a while until I was urged by the operator, who shouted out to me, stating, "Your stop, my buddy. Please get back on immediately. I can't possibly stay here all night." I moved down the hallway and stepped off the bus with anxiety, experiencing the cool clean air hitting my skin as I reconnected to the homeland of the living. Before driving away, I remember the driver bidding me good night and stating he would see me once more. So that's my narrative, but it's not yet over. You may be wondering why I did not give up on the mysterious bus after my horrific experience. For a long period of time, I did, but my enthusiasm eventually got the best of me. I dislike the unpredictability of life, not understanding what is ahead of me. I used to believe that was just the way things were, but now I know much better. The Harbinger exists out there, and he has the information I'm looking for. I'm not going to squander another chance. I've been after the bus for years, and I've gotten it twice more. I joined both times and escaped the traps laid by the spooky travelers. And the both occasions, I awaited for the Harbinger to join, but he refused to leave his refuge, so my hopes were dashed. This has been terribly discouraging, but I refuse to quit up. This evening, I'll look for the bus once more, and I'll keep attempting so until the Harbinger responds. I am aware of the dangers. I could take the mysterious bus one night and never return home. Nonetheless, I must complete this task. Whatever the cost, I must understand the truth. Please pardon me, I have a bus to grab.